Hi everyone, it's Matthew here with another episode of Swordscomic Secrets, and we're going all the way up to episode 50 today. So, getting right into it, episode 41. This is the Infinity Sword episode. It sort of sets up a long running gag where there is a sword that's always growing. It's inspired by a three-part series of episodes from the original run of DuckTales, where they release the Hand of Midas and or the Golden Goose, I think it is, um, and the gold starts spreading from the goose all the way over the world and slowly destroys it, and they save the day just in the nick of time. Spoilers. Um, but that sort of cataclysmic event was something that I thought of when I made this episode. Um, that that shit freaked me out as a child, so I've always thought about that episode. Um, and I guess rightfully so, because there are still people to this day who are stressed out that the Infinity Sword is still growing in the background of these comics. It seems to be a big deal that we need to solve it. It's also vaguely Yu-Gi-Oh inspired. He's kind of got the anime big pointy here, and there's sort of an Egyptian bent on the architecture, so those things were all married together on purpose to make this episode. And so this next episode is based on Final Fantasy X. In the game, Waka gives Tidus a sword called Brotherhood, which was a sword that he gave to his younger brother Chapu before he died. So it's sort of got this sort of story significance to it. But then in the game, its stats are okay, but you can get better swords pretty quickly. So that's what this episode is lampooning. And this character, he's sort of Tidus adjacent, and he wears fishnet shirt and that sort of thing, and a lot of silly colors. But it's just a very obvious parody of Final Fantasy X. This episode is about Smart Sword customer support, so you can see that there are orcs who use crystal balls to help Smart Sword owners deal with their problems. Basically, this paladin has used the ability Turn Undead, and instead of turning the undead back into corpses, it's turned them into alive people. And for the paladin, that's not exactly what he asked for, so he's annoyed about it. So he calls customer support. This is the introduction of Rapia Taper, who is a character who goes on to be very important throughout the series. Very basic joke. He has priorities more akin to an animal than a sword fighter. In this episode, Bread Knight encounters a giant. The giant is kind of explaining that giants aren't just big humans, they're big orcs. And so he's basically lecturing Bread Knight, who doesn't really want to hear it. But in the end, he gets given a giant horse, which turns out to be a humanoid giant. So there was some truth to there being humanoid giants. They're just considered giant horses in this setting. This came out in 2018, so I don't think Cart Titans existed yet. But every time I post this comic now, someone says, "It's the Cart Titan." And I only watched the first season of Attack on Titan, so I don't really know anything about Cart Titan, other than it's a pretty superficial resemblance as far as I can tell. Yeah. Also in this episode, I had to censor it because the giant horse had his butt showing in the final panel. So I redrew him, but I forgot to redraw the tattoos running along the orc giant's stomach. So they just end abruptly right in the middle there, which was an accident, and I should fix it, but I just never got around to it. This next episode is Smith the Blacksmith finding the God Sword Boltad's blade. It's the same sword from episode 2 that had its handle broken in half. And basically he picks it up and takes it home and confirms that he can see the sword's soul, which we don't confirm for a very long time, but only some humans can see sword souls. They have an ability called Sharp Eyes, which is a genetically inherited trait. So yeah, only some people can see these souls, but it's not really explicitly explained until much later. Here's the Travel Goblin again. basically he's just lecturing a guy to take better care of himself. If he wants to get a girlfriend, he's got to try harder. And again, Travel Goblin's appearance has sort of been softened some more. It's pretty inconsistent, that skull shape. A lot of people think he's some kind of bug. It's supposed to be a skull. There is a head inside there. But, you know. This episode is the introduction of Glaive the Adventurer and her friends Cutter and Slicer. Basically, it sort of makes fun of the Final Fantasy or JRPG tropes of a hero's village burning down, and then sprinkles in some casual racism because they all assume naturally that because he's white and male, he is the young protagonist whose village burned down. But it's actually Glaive. She hasn't really been expanded upon much, but her backstory that I never got around to drawing the comic for is that a fire dragon and a water dragon both destroy a village simultaneously in a battle. But, you know, just never got around to doing that one. We're back to Harp on her quest. She finished the first quest. She gets a few more. The joke is basically that it escalates very quickly into the third one, being to slay a giant monster. The location of the first and second quests is in the sort of area around Lake Tang, which is where the lake monster is. So that's sort of the place where also places like the Fungin exists. You can sort of tie those things together by their color scheme and the fact there are helpberry bushes and sword sheep everywhere. But then the final panel is set where the Dark Knights live, which is a bit further west of if they have a west. I guess they have a west. A bit further west of that area on the world map. And then episode 50 is kind of bringing everything together again. It's Xiphos and his wife Copus versus the great sages of Heltshire. You can sort of get your first aerial view of the city and the giant sort of sword castle that sits in the middle of it. And then you can see Kargob sort of explicitly highlighting the joke that there are some clans who believe in 6 eyes and some who believe in 8, which was never put to words before this episode. And this was sort of something that I've been holding on to for over 2 months by this point to sort of dramatically reveal. In hindsight, I could have kept that joke obscured for a lot longer, but that's sort of what happens when you finally reveal these things. This is also the second version, because originally Copus had blood running out of her mouth in a sort of berserker rage. It seemed to just distract too much from everything else going on, so I removed it. And that's about it. So once again, thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed these fun little facts, and I'll see you next time.